The race to replace retiring Congressman Ted Deutch is going to come down primarily to two choices, Democrat Jared Moskowitz or Republican Joe Budd. Although the district favors Democrats, Budd is confident that he can win. He is the leader of a pro-Trump club in Palm Beach that draws more than 1,000 people to their meetings monthly. So I always like to sort of start with the same question for any candidate. Why are you running for this seat?
Hey, that's a great question. I didn't even think about running for this seat until late April. And I started looking at it, and I started after the legislature maps were vetoed, and then DeSantis came out with his own maps. It changed the district of where I live personally. Then I saw the Cook political report come out and say it was a D5. And I thought, this is an opportunity. So I started actually thinking about running. My wife encouraged me to run, which is unusual. Usually they're saying, no, don't do that. But she was really encouraging me. So at that point, I really started looking into the details of it, and I decided to run.
And what do you see as the most important issue in the campaign?
I think one of the most important issues right now in the campaign is what we've done with our energy issues. The Biden administration on day 2 shut down all the leases on federal lands and shut down the Keystone XL pipeline and drilling in Anwar. And that was the catalyst to cause all the high inflation numbers and the worsening of our economy just from energy independence. So I think that is the single issue that I would like to have addressed.
All right, so energy independence is one of the key issues you're running on. What are some of the others?
Yeah, I mean, and also too, energy independence, there's a side effect there. You know, we're paying $90 a barrel of oil right now. That could be $30. The side effect is not only is it crushing our economy, but it's funding Putin's war in Ukraine, because Putin wouldn't be able to afford that war if it wasn't for all of the high prices he can charge for the oil and gas that they deliver. He basically has Europe held hostage, and we're funding that war by our energy policy. And just this morning, you saw another 15 million barrels of oil they're going to release from the strategic oil reserves. That's not to win a midterm election. That's a bad thing to do. That's the national security issue. So other issues in my area, I mean, besides the runaway inflation, which has led to the record high gas prices, record high food costs, record high housing costs, we're talking about everyday pocketbook issues for the consumer that just can't afford the Biden policies.
Do you agree with the Fed's decision to continue to raise interest rates as a way of trying to get a handle on inflation?
Well, actually, no. I think the issue's the exact opposite. And we have production problems, not demand problems, okay? We actually have a strong demand economy. What we're not doing well is the production side of it. Think about this way. I was talking to a owner of a car dealership, and he basically said what happens in the manufacturing process, if one person has COVID, 50 people on each side of that person take weeks off from the production line, and that hurts production. So a lot of these mandates, shutdowns, and things like that have hurt the production side. So instead, the Biden administration is trying to hurt demand by raising the interest rates and stopping the demand that the consumers have. We're just the opposite. We need to do things that can increase production, not decrease demand. And you can fix the economy in a completely different way than the Biden administration is trying to go about it.
Jared Moskowitz has challenged you, or says that he won't even debate you because you're an election denier. I know you deny it, but let's get into it a little bit. Who won the 2020 presidential election?
Joe Biden won, but again, I say that's because of a proliferation of absentee ballots with verification of signatures being checked at the least amount of our lifetime, the most unsecure election of our lifetime, drop boxes all over the place, Zuckerbucks. So you could say that the Democrats outsmarted the Republicans, and you can't prove the election was stolen, but it's just semantics. What's the difference between saying the election was stolen and saying there's a proliferation of absentee ballots? At the end of the day, it's the same. If under Governor DeSantis and the election integrity laws that have been put in place in Florida would have been put in place in every state in the whole United States, then you could say without a doubt that the election was stolen. But in Florida, we have great election integrity laws, and those shenanigans weren't allowed to happen here in Florida.
So you believe that the Democrats won the 2020 election through manipulation, fraud, other things. You recognize Joe Biden as president, but you believe that the path that he took to get there involved fraud committed by Democrats at the election poll.
I wouldn't use the term fraud and I wouldn't use the term stolen because then you're saying that they legally violated a law. Now,
What words would you use if you wouldn't use? You talked about
I would
shenanigans and
just
fraud.
like I just said, the least secure election in my lifetime. I would say that the Democrats outsmarted the Republicans as usual. It happens all the time. So that's what I would say. But to actually,
You think? But I guess what I'm trying to get at is you believe that there were many fraudulent votes for Joe Biden because they were just smarter at collecting fraudulent votes.
well, you just watch a movie like 2,000 Mules where you see somebody dumping a mass amount of ballots into a drop box at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And does that pass the smell test with you? No, it doesn't pass the smell test with me.
It also doesn't, just because you see it in a movie doesn't make it true. I think that movie has been debunked.
Stolen.
Say again, I'm sorry.
And that's why I won't say stolen. Just doesn't pass the smell test. It's not above reproach.
Okay, I think you're playing a little semantics here. It seems like in your gut you think Donald Trump won. If this had been an honest election like we have in Florida, like you said, if DeSantis's rules were applied nationwide, you believe Trump would have won the election.
Absolutely, yes, that's true.
Okay. Do you believe that Donald Trump, through claiming that he won, that the election was fraudulent, that the election was stolen, by perpetuating that storyline, do you think Donald Trump has done harm to the American democracy?
No, I don't think so. No. Again, you go back to January 6th and he said, make your voices known. He said, peacefully make your voices heard. Okay. That's what he said. Those were his words. All right. They asked for, Nancy Pelosi to have better security around the Capitol. She decided that she didn't want to do that. So she bears more responsibility for the actions that occurred there. And listen,
so Nancy Pelosi is more responsible for January 6th than Donald Trump.
she bears some of that responsibility as well. Yes, they didn't protect it like they were asked to protect it. But listen, before I even decided, I was never going to run for another election my entire life. And back on January 6th, on Joe Budd's personal Facebook page, I condemned the violence of that day. Period. I condemned the violence of that day. There's all kinds of issues. We all saw videos where some of the officers there were waving people through, and that just doesn't make sense to me. But those videos are real. And so again, Donald Trump's not responsible for what happened there. He said peacefully. Those were his words.
Why was there violence at the Capitol on that day?
Hey, listen, people had strong feelings of what happened, leading up to that election. I think one of the problems is election issues. For example, Pennsylvania, unlike Florida, Florida counts their vote by mail ballots in advance. And typically within an hour after the election, when the panhandle closes, those numbers are released right away. Unlike Pennsylvania, they're not allowed to count until the polls close.
Well, you are aware that the Pennsylvania legislature, the Democrats in the Pennsylvania legislature, tried to pass that very bill in advance of the 2020 election to allow for early counting, and it was the Republicans in the legislature in Pennsylvania that shut that down.
Well, if that's the case, I think the Republicans made a mistake, because those elections, ballots, just like in Florida, there's no reason why they couldn't be counted in advance. And that way it adds to a more transparent, fast-moving process.
Up next, we talk to the Democrat challenging incumbent Republican Congressman Carlos Jimenez. Stay with us.